Hey everybody, welcome to the Bluegrass Life podcast. I'm Claudia Coffey. This is a really important topic today that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about mental health. You know, you probably know somebody that struggled with mental health. I know people that have struggled with mental health. Many people have sought out medication, therapy. For some people, that works. For others, it doesn't, and they certainly can feel lost. Well, today we're going to talk about a groundbreaking, innovative treatment that is zapping away depression, brain fog. It is innovative in the way that it's treating depression and these mental health illnesses, but it's also innovative in the way that it can help you expand the way you think. My guest today is Terri Paige with the Medical Transformation Center. She's going to dial us through all the things you want to know, like what is it? It's called ExoMind treatment. What is it? How does it work? When does it begin to take effect? But more importantly today, this is a conversation about hope. Talking about mental health and getting people the treatments that they deserve. And this, of course, is on a bigger stage too, on the national spotlight. People are really talking about innovative ways to approach health, our health, taking our health back and looking at it in a different way. You've got the Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., putting these issues to the forefront, saying, let's look at things differently. So today, we're going to look at mental health differently. ExoMind, how it works, how it can help you. This is an open, fearless, and daring conversation. Let's dive in. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. And Terri, I love that I'm talking about it with you because we have talked about health in ways that you have made me personally open up my eyes to how I approach health. Mental illness is something that everybody struggles with. This has been in my family. I think we all can name somebody that has been affected by this. And that feeling of frustration is so real and it's so scary. And before we kind of go into what you can offer with this treatment that I've read about everywhere now, is let's talk about your story first and Medical Transformation Center's story, because you all approach things differently.
We do, but it was an evolution, like so many things are. It was an evolution, and we do have our roots, our business roots. My husband, of course, has been a physician for many years since we opened up a clinic in 1992, a traditional primary care clinic. But I will tell you, and we've talked about this before, that I was patient number one. I'm the guinea pig, which is okay. But this is a personal topic for me too, because in my 20s, actually, and it was kind of a cascade of different health issues, but I was confronted with some pretty severe depression. And back then, all we kind of knew was therapy or medicine, right? Mm-hmm. And I couldn't really tie the condition to any one specific thing that maybe happened. Sometimes you can connect depression with an event, right? You have a major life event, you connect that with it. And I tell this story actually in the classes that I do regularly here for our patients at Medical Transformation Center. But it was kind of a compounding of things. It was just overall health issues, it was mental health, it was autoimmune disease, gut health, a lot of different things. And I did actually kind of felt like, okay, my only choice is to use medication. And I had many physicians advise me to do that. So I did for many years. And, but it does start to feel like, okay, this is it for me. This is just, I'm on meds for the rest of my life. And it wasn't until, kind of everything hits the fan. Everything hits the fan.
For a reason. It makes you really wake up and go, wait a minute, what am I doing?
That we started to look at things differently. And that is really the genesis story of Medical Transformation Center, too. It was in 2008, 2009, when personally at home, we started to look at health differently because I was such a mess. On and off of medications, struggling with my gut, struggling with immune problems, struggling with autoimmune problems, energy, fatigue, all the different things. And it kind of, you cry uncle. You say, okay, I can't do this anymore. There's got to be another way. And so Carl, my husband, started to look at things differently, started to research and study. And we started down the path of gut health and, how my body, what was happening inside of my body and trying to heal from the inside out. and one thing led to another, and that was a big piece of my mental health concerns too, was just the condition of my GI tract, that I couldn't make my neurotransmitters anymore. Not to say that there was some other things in my background maybe that precipitated that, and we were talking about this earlier before we started to record, was just trauma. Sometimes trauma, when we learn, there's an area of our brain that will kind of shrink and shut down in order to protect us when we've had trauma. And, that can also create difficulty managing emotions and higher thoughts and things like that too. So there's just a lot of pieces to this. Ultimately, that led us down the road of, I was starting to heal and feel better and was able to go off medications and start to get my body to heal itself. And then we wanted to take that to the masses, so to speak, and using what we'd learned he got some extra training, a fellowship and board certifications. I went down a path of getting trained as a certified health coach, and then some, regenerative therapies and so forth. But that was really the genesis of Medical Transformation Center, was that struggle to really find health as opposed to just managing by the meds, if that makes sense.
Right. And do you find, what is different about coming here as opposed to a traditional medical office?
Well,
especially when, take us through, like, I'm going to come in and say, I've been struggling with X for a very, very long time, and I just can't seem to figure it out. Like, what is it? Do you have a lot of people that come in with the help me with X because nobody can figure it out for 20 something years, and let's take a different approach to fixing it?
We do. We actually, that was really pretty much all of the people that came to see us, especially in the beginning, was we were known as that spot to go if somebody couldn't figure out what was wrong with you already, or if you had a diagnosis but you just weren't willing to cry uncle and say, okay, this is just me. I'm not going to get any better. I just got to manage. And so,
which is a horrible way to live.
It really is. Or,
like, nobody is going to help me, so I'm just going to live like this.
Yeah, or just, this is the way it is. There's no treatment, there's no way to really get healed or better. And we have to be really careful, as we, I don't ever want to tell you, oh, I'm going to heal you, but, that it's
that's
just
a different
managing.
practice.
Yeah. Well, that it's just I have to manage it as opposed to really truly regenerate and get better. And so that really is the essence of Medical Transformation Center. And I will tell you that, really what we're going to do is we have a large toolbox. Okay. I mean, we, like I said earlier, we have our roots in traditional allopathic medicine. So we have all of those tools, and sometimes they're the right tools, whether it's just, I'm sorry, but you need surgery for something really big,
right.
Or, right now we need to use this traditional tool to stop the fire, and then we can work on the backstory, right? Sometimes they're the right tools, so we have them. So we haven't thrown those away. We've just added to that toolbox. And so what we're going to do is and people will say, do you want all my records before I get there? We're like, no, we don't want your records, because we want a clean slate. We want to know first. Now, after we have done our evaluation, then, okay, yeah, maybe we want this record or that record. But we really actually want a clean slate, because then that takes any bias out. We just want to understand from you what your symptoms are, what, we have a large intake evaluation that we do. I mean, it takes our patients quite a while to fill it out, but it's very valuable, because it's regular medical history. But then it's also toxicity exposure, major life events, stress, history of tick bites, insect bites, exposures to toxins, or did you grow up on a farm, where there was a lot of, pesticides, things like that, right? So there's a lot of different pieces to this. What do you eat? Give me 3 days of what you ate. All of these different pieces together. And then, folks come in and they share their story and what their pain points are. And then after that conversation, we may have a few things that we're going to say, okay, just right at the get-go, we know you need to, why don't you start on XYZ? But then they start an education process with us too. And those are those classes I was referencing. They start doing some classes with us. And then during that time, we have ordered whatever testing we think is appropriate. And I mean, we're looking at a lot of stuff. So we're going to order some regular tests. But, and therein lies something else too. In the traditional paradigm, there's what's normal, right? When you look at the bell curve, okay, this is normal, and that's based on the standard American population and what's most prevalent, right? That's normal. But there's a distinction there. Just because it's normal doesn't mean it's optimal. And so that's the space that we play in. We know maybe, okay, yeah, technically on the lab, it's not lit up in red or yellow, like you would see on a lab value. But for us, we really want you to be over here to be optimal. Mm-hmm. And so we're running labs that might be considered regular, everyday run-of-the-mill labs, to part of it. But then we're also running, genomics. We're running, looking at your food sensitivities, not allergies, but sensitivities, which there's a difference. Gut permeability. Are you absorbing your nutrients? What are you deficient in? Are you full of toxins, X, Y, and Z? What type of infections do you have underlying in your body that just are rearing up all the time? That's a piece of this too. What do your different hormone levels look like? I mean, so there's just a whole battery of things that we're looking at.
Entirely different evaluation.
It's a big evaluation.
A lot.
We're kind of known for the amount, and there's always blood involved, but it could be urine, it could be stool. Because you could learn so much by looking at poop. Okay, you learn a lot. It's forensics, right? You learn a lot because you learn what's going on inside the body by what comes out in the trash. And so did you like that?
That was fantastic. I mean,
but
perfect explanation. And it's the truth.
It's true. It's true. If you want to know how somebody
it's the first
lives,
thing a vet looks at.
Well, you know what?
Right?
Yeah, if you want to know how somebody truly lives, right? Even though I say, oh, I do if you look at their trash, truly like their trash,
yes.
You go, yeah, you said you eat a clean diet, but look at all these
McDonald's
Hershey's wrappers and these McDonald's.
Yeah.
You really get the truth.
I
right?
see exactly how much you're drinking, right?
Yeah,
or I
so
see,
you get the truth.
I see if you're smoking. I see all that.
Yeah, you get the truth in the trash.
You do.
So there. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. It's the truth, though.
I always tell people, in the medical world, it's okay to talk about poop and pee.
Yeah.
It's all right.
You deal with it daily.
Yeah. It's okay. But anyway, so we look at that. We may want an image. We may send you to get an ultrasound or, a CT. Again, it just depends on what's going on with you. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then after we get all of that data back, then they come in and they sit down with a physician and they go, okay, here it is. Here's all the data. Here's what you've told me. Here's the environmental pieces. Here's the major life events, because of course, that's energy, right? The things that have happened to us and how that shows up. I mean, there's a whole world of now that's opening up in medicine, quantum physics, just that piece too in medicine. And so it all plays in together. And, from that information, then we start, pulling it together and going, okay, here's, what's likely going on. Here's how we're going to work together. And it's a partnership because we have amazing tools, but there are pieces that only the individual could do, like change their diet, like take on a different lifestyle, like get sleep, all of those other pieces that we have to take responsibility for as owners of our body, right?
Mm-hmm. And a big part of it too is educating the person about what they can do to live optimally going forward. That's a big part of it. I think sometimes when we go to a traditional doctor's office or we just kind of approach things of, I'm just going to let you handle it. I'm just going to let you give me a simple pill to fix this. There's so much ownership in how we want to then manage our health that I think it's a partnership.
Yeah, it really is.
You have to be willing to do this in order to have that optimal life.
Right. I mean, like I always tell folks in the classes that, that we conduct, I say, we do. I mean, you've come here because you've heard of all the tools that we have, and we have them. But I'm just going to tell you, they are not going to work as well as they could if you don't do your piece. And it's taking on just that. And it's hard to do, especially if you're coming at it, maybe say, for example, from the standard American diet. It's like you can't do everything all at once. Mm-mm. And nor do we expect you to. But, let's start peeling that onion. I mean, heck, what is it? Let's see, what did I tell you? 2008 to what's to, 17 years later, right? 2025. I'm still peeling that onion.
In your own mental health, in your own mental health, and your own physical health journey.
Right. Yeah. And your own physical health, too, just like changes in diet, right? You start to realize, okay, well, I've cleaned up over here, but I'm still doing this. And then you start to realize, oh, you know what? When I do that, when I eat that, I feel a little funny. So, it is. It's just like an evolution.
Yeah. And so you all have evolved in a way where you're taking that medical transformation center approach to physical health and diagnosing problems within the body. And you're looking at this now from a mental health angle. And this ExoMind is the device that's gonna get you there, which it's a treatment. I mean, unlike anything I've ever heard before.
It's pretty cool. It is pretty cool. We stepped into the using more physics, back to using physics too as part of what we do. We stepped into that world, I guess, 4 years ago, with the first device, and it's a company that we have loved, being able to avail ourselves to that technology. But in essence, what it does is it uses physics, energy in this case, to help the body heal itself, to help it remodel. I mean, it's all the way from pelvic floor integrity to skin laxity and muscle density and strength.
Is it some of the same technology that you hear about, like in the M Sculpt? Is that kind of technology?
It's the same energy. It's the same energy. It's MRI technology. In this case, it's the TMS, the transcranial magnetic stimulation technology for the brain. That's what ExoMind uses, but at a higher level than what's been available so far in the market. And so, ExoMind is one in a series of these tools that we've brought in the last 4 years. I will tell you this, though. I think it's important to qualify. There's not one tool that's going to support mental health and cognition and function. It's several usually. They work synergistically, and so adding ExoMind into our portfolio, so to speak, is just another really powerful way to utilize physics to help augment everything else we're doing. Like we talked about earlier, mental health. A lot of that is driven too, just from a physical standpoint, from your gut health, right? And so many folks, especially post-COVID. COVID wreaked havoc in your GI tract. And so there were so many instances and cases, and our colleagues have talked about it, or we've seen it here in our practice. There's post-COVID brain, whether it's just brain fog and difficulty concentrating and focusing, memory, but also depression. And that's because the gut, so to speak, in its ability to make neurotransmitters was kind of really compromised with that virus. And that can happen with a lot of viruses. So that's just one thing. So you have to work on, rebuilding that. At the same time, being able to utilize something like ExoMind to really remodel that neuroplasticity of the brain and help it to recover and regenerate.
And so what exactly is it and how does it work? Where is it? What exactly is it? And does it sits on your head?
So it doesn't sit all the way. You're just laying down very comfortably on a spa bed or on a couch or a procedure bed, whatever, and just reclining. There's a special little cradle for your head. And then our nurses will do a special little test. You have to put your fingers in your ears so that they can locate the exact right spot. But it's just it looks like a little arc, applicator, and it just goes right about here, and then once it's turned on and they're kind of testing to make sure that it's in, just doing another test to make sure it's in the right spot, you hold your right hand up and, they'll start a little bit of the energy to go through there. If you get a little reflex, then they go, okay, we need to adjust that a little bit so that there shouldn't be a reflex. So it's just an opportunity to really, again, ensure there's some testing that you can do to make sure I'm in the right absolute spot. So it's the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Ooh,
right there.
Better you say it than me.
What an amazing, oh my gosh, just in delving down into that, what that area of the brain is responsible for, so much that we value, right? So, emotion, mood regulation, impulse control. Use your imagination on all of these applications, right? So smoking, compulsive eating, OCD, mood regulation, depression, anxiety, and then just higher thought, cognition, ability to plan, executive functioning, working memory. So just kind of think of it like as a reboot for your computer. When you're able to utilize this type of technology, and it's a 24 less than 30 minutes. There are different protocols, so kind of a varying amount of time there, but all of them less than 30 minutes. And you just lay there and let that energy just kind of, and it's very.
Do you feel anything while you're laying there?
So in my experience, everybody's got their own experiences, but and this is kind of a general when you read the studies and what other people's experiences were. When I do it, I feel it's kind of like this. It's a pull. It's like I want to sink into the bed and just feel this real calm. It was nice. I'm not gonna lie.
30 minutes of relaxation.
It was not,
reorganizing your brain.
Yeah, just kind of rewiring and strengthening the good pathways. All the ones that are productive and constructive, and and helping to heal the ones, promoting that healing of damaged pathways and things that maybe have been shrunk up or shriveled up for protection or injury, right? Traumatic brain injury, another application there. So in my instance it was 24 minutes. It's just you feel like a little tapping, but not like a painful tap. You just because it's energy, and then like and then just like a little hum, I guess. Maybe that would be the best way to describe it. Little vibration. Was not painful for me at all. Most people will report no pain. I think there's like a tiny little instance where some people might say, it hurt a little bit, or maybe I had a headache for a few minutes afterwards. I didn't experience that.
Did they notice results immediately, like right after?
Well, the treatment protocol, the general mental wellness treatment protocol is 6 treatments. You could do 2 a week for 3 weeks, or once per week for 6 weeks. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm going to hasten that up and do twice a week. But
especially if it's that relaxing.
Oh yeah, so like over 90% report feeling happier and more content after the treatment protocol, right? I think it's around the 70s, in the 70 percentiles reported from the studies, a lessening and an improvement in depression and anxiety and impulse control and cognition. So I mean that's significant. And then it just builds over time because you're working on rewiring. And then when because MTC, we have multiple tools, right? I'm telling you, it's not
got a big
one
toolkit.
tool. Oh my goodness, then you couple that with some of our regenerative therapies, and of course you're working on your nutrition and your gut health, and maybe using some regenerative therapies like peptides or exosome, some other things like that. You are really starting to get into renovation, which is exciting.
Who do you think would be the best candidate for something like this? Is it, we hear about so many veterans that suffer from PTSD, have traumatic head injuries as well. Are they good candidates, or is it somebody that has found no success in the past with medication? Who could see the best benefits from this?
I certainly think, and I want to be mindful here because we are not putting ourselves out there as mental health professionals.
Right.
So understand that we are coming at this from the context of the physician-run world of what we see overall in health. Okay, so just I want to put that just that caveat in there, because certainly therapy and all of the different avenues that folks use to work on their mental health have value. I mean, some
it may
things,
even want to be used in conjunction with
absolutely, especially if you've got trauma and things like that in there. You don't want to just do this and go poof, I'm cured.
It's all gone.
Not, because there are coping mechanisms, and there's there are things to work through on that therapeutic side that are not part of what we offer at MTC. So I do want to put that out there. I'm not saying this is it, come here, only do this, we've got it. I don't want to, that would be responsible to say.
No.
So in terms of who would benefit, I certainly do think that if there are no contraindications, and there are some, I mean, you can't have any metal, you have to be able to get into an MRI machine, okay? So if you can do that, then, absolutely people that are suffering from PTSD or traumatic brain injury, folks that maybe have failed meaning they didn't work, antidepressant medications. That's actually the FDA clearance for this type of technology is if you failed 3 or 4 antidepressants, then you can try this. That's, in the insurance-based world. You're allowed to try this and your insurance might cover some of it if you failed it. And it's a different machine. It's not the ExoMind. It's different technology, but or similar technology, but a different application. So those folks, absolutely. Or people that maybe want to see what they could do to get their body to and their brain to heal a little bit more, I'm going to say naturally, and maybe don't want to go down maybe yet the path of pharmaceuticals to treat depression or anxiety. I mean, they would want to work in conjunction with a medical professional and do that, but that to me seems like a really nice use case. Again, having had the experience of being on them, I'm trying to think of how long. Probably, I don't know, 14 years. Long time.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Long time. And so, if someone would have been able to give me that option back then, because I fought it for a long time. I thought, no, I don't want to. But at the end, it was what was helpful for me at the time. But to have this as a choice, we didn't know anything about the nutrition component. We didn't know any about that back then. I just knew I felt awful and miserable and couldn't figure out why. So to have, all of this together, to have whether it's, nutrition, supplementation, some IV infusion with regenerative therapies, we're really looking at healing the gut, and we've got ExoMind. What a powerful set of tools to help somebody really feel mentally better and well. And then, other use cases are, heck, you know what? I just want to be optimal. I want my brain to keep firing as well as it can. Or, maybe I see, dementia and cognitive decline in my family and I want to be a little bit more proactive. And again, this is a tool, but also I'm going to tell you, you need to dial down your metabolism and your nutrition and your gut health and all that too.
There's a whole lot of other factors that you've got to work in tandem with in order for this to be successful.
But this is a huge tool. It's so exciting to have this technology.
And I mean, you mentioned from the aspect of dementia, I think we're all looking for ways. I see more and more supplements on the market help improve your cognitive health. Ward off the signs or the symptoms if you have like somebody in your family that has dementia. Something like this could certainly prolong your optimal life if you're concerned about something like that.
It could, dementia, Alzheimer's, I mean, it's often been referred to in our circles as type 3 diabetes. So there's that whole connection between metabolic health and you actually start setting that up way sooner than when your symptoms show up. So, in middle age really is where you start really setting the stage for cognitive decline. So really, my advice to anybody would be start now. I mean, it's not going to be too late if you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s to start to do this, but really start looking at how you nourish yourself and how you take care, and do you sleep, and do you, all of those pieces, because if you're not, I don't care how many supplements you're taking, again, I mean,
it's not going to work.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And having that knowledge, but so many of the toxins that we're exposed to too, and you were mentioning earlier, the new HHS, and all that. I mean, that there's,
do you think that
that's very much in alignment with what we believe in terms of looking at, what's available out there? What are the additives? What are the preservatives? What are the pesticides? That's why we test for toxicity, and we've done that for 12 years.
Do you think that there's a changing attitude in the country towards treatments like this, that people want to be open and explore different things? And I think when you have a Secretary of Health and Human Services that has been very open about, I want to take charge of my health, I want to look at different things, do you think that kind of opens the door to, yes, I can explore different things, and there's just more of an acceptance of it? Because for so long, people, I think, feel like, well, this is my only avenue. I have to go this traditional avenue, whether it works or not, because it's the only thing that's approved.
Yeah. Well, Claudia, it's interesting that you say that because I've actually been talking, in our planning team and a lot of different things that we're doing internally with MTC. We've been talking about this, 2011, when we first started implementing things like this into our primary care office that we were the only game out there. The only people doing this. People came from all over to look for us and to find us. And we've always said, ultimately, we want to be out there, tip of the spear, but making this standard of care. And it was really interesting because still, even 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, it's just this industry that MTC is in terms of this regenerative cellular medicine world. Functional medicine is another term that it's been referred to as. It just kind of growing, kind of like this. Well, again, COVID really changed so much for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and so we went home like everybody else did during 2020 and saw our patients remotely. We weren't sure what was going to be the future of Medical Transformation Center as we, kind of went, okay, well, we need to do this, but we don't know when we're even going to go back. Well, what happened to us during 2020 was this. We started just growing like crazy, even though we were our whole team of our 6, I think we had 6 folks on our team back then. We were all at home with a system of how we would hand off patient care throughout the day as we did all of our remote visits. But we saw a really big upturn in people seeking us out to go, how can I take responsibility for my health? This is scary. What's going on? And of course, we want to honor that. We never want to, take advantage of that, fear. But it was a wonderful thing to be able to go, hey, we can partner alongside you and really show you now, as opposed to just being reactionary and hitting something.
Nobody wants to be reactionary anymore.
Right.
We want to get ahead of things.
So I think COVID was a big shift in just that awareness and that openness to looking at other ways to be more proactive. And then also, honestly, I think, and I'm probably going to get the generation wrong, but I think, is it millennials that are like it? So there's baby boomers, which it depends on who's counting the year. I could be a baby boomer or I could be a Gen X.
Uh-huh.
I'm right there at that 1 year that could be either one. What's right below Gen X? Is it millennials? So millennials are very much interested, and you'll hear terms like biohacking and things like that. Now, biohacking can be good, bad, or ugly because there's can be a lot of we clean up a lot of biohacking messes too, but just that curiosity and plus too, you've just got open source on the internet. You can search anything. TikTok, one of my sons that's 20 gets all of his education from TikTok, and actually what he's plugged into is right, what he's learning, and I'm like, yeah, you can watch that, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think it's that. I think there's an explosion of information. There was a curiosity, a hunger and a thirst post-COVID in that post-COVID world. And so now, there are a lot of folks out there that are doing bits and pieces of what MTC is doing. And, at first you're like, oh, competition, right? That's your first but then you realize, now wait a minute. We always said we wanted this to be standard of care. So, how do we all get to work together to just create this groundswell? And I think that's maybe what you are seeing is that there's a more openness because there's so much conversation about it.
I think people feel comfortable now speaking out loud that this is what I'd like to seek. This is what I think. This is what I need to research. People feel comfortable actually talking about it.
Yeah.
Which we should.
Right.
Why should we not feel comfortable
You're
talking
right.
about different ways to take care of our health?
Mm-hmm.
Like before it was almost, very taboo.
Yeah.
Now it's, look at you taking charge of your health.
Well,
you find other people that are sharing those same ideas and thoughts, and you're like, let's get together and collaborate. Let's find a way to live better. And isn't it that just the whole goal? Let's just live better.
I grew up in a medical family. My dad was a physician, and very old school, traditional. That's how I grew up, and I will tell you that there was a leeriness of anything amongst that the establishment.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, amongst the establishment. um, towards anything that might be different from what was codified and taught in medical schools. And there's a whole backstory to that, and when that happened, and when the Rockefellers instituted, here's
Mm-hmm.
what can only be taught. And, like anything, I think if you follow the money, sometimes you'll realize that maybe good information is suppressed because it doesn't align with the financial
The
interests.
powers that be.
Right. So there were a lot of things, like vitamins, oh, that's quackery, can't have vitamins too much. Those are quack, that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there were a lot of things like that. And I think now those doors are getting blown off, because there was a lot of suppression of things that weren't in this narrow box of what was taught.
Mm-hmm.
And anything out of that was quackery or
Right.
snake oil.
Well, again, it goes back to millennials and what you can get access to on TikTokers. You kind of have your truth seekers out there that are going to get to the bottom of things and share things that people feel like, I can get to the bottom of this and I can talk about what I want, and I can call that person out and say that's not true. Like, there is more of that now where you can get to the bottom of it on your own, or you can find somebody on TikTok that can.
Yeah, and I think I mean, too, what we've noticed, and we try to keep our finger on the pulse of this as much as we can, but there is stuff out there, and again, like I was alluding to earlier, that we clean up, because like anything, if you've taken a weekend seminar and you've got this much information, and then you go out and you start to practice or disseminate, that's kind of tough.
Kind of scary.
Yeah, that's kind of tough. So there's value, and that's why where there's more value in some collaboration, some more openness to learning, because that's that's the area that we see from our perspective, having been in this field for so long, is that it's wonderful that the awareness is out there and there are more people talking about it, but it also has to be responsible.
Yeah.
There's some trends right now, like NAD, IV, dangerous in our opinion, but it's a big trend right now, so that's the thing. You just weigh it, make sure you have all the facts.
Do you think that these types of treatments have been far more acceptable, open, and used overseas in other countries than here in the US?
In some regard, yes, and in other regard, it's shocking to me what they can't get. I mean, for example, we went to London a couple of years ago with a teaching group, an educational group that we're part of, and held the first, World Congress on Peptide World Congress. And the folks that were there, they were so hungry to learn more cellular medicine principles and things like that, but they couldn't get peptides in England. Now that was a bummer, because they were so excited, and we were just like, yeah, this one and that one, and these could be used to support XYZ. And I mean, a lot of them, if they were from England, they said others had come from other countries, and they could get some.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's a lot of openness. I mean, my daughter lives in France, and I forget what she was telling us the other day, but I mean, it was just things that we do here, she could just easily get at the pharmacy. So that was great.
Yeah.
So again, it just kind of depends on what it is.
Depends
but
on
yes,
the country.
Yeah.
So where do people go from here if they know someone, or they're suffering from depression, or they want to optimize their cognitive ability? What do you recommend as a first step to get started, to begin the process, to get evaluated?
Yeah, well, I recommend that they either go to our website, medicaltransformationcenter.com, and fill out the the contact form, because especially if they just want to have a conversation about ExoMind, we do an intake consultation to make sure that it's a good fit for that person. So they would do a consult with one of our team members for that, and they can request that. There's a form to do that. If they wanted to look at the bigger picture, like we described earlier, where we look at the whole picture, which, that's always going to be my favorite, because I like to really just be as effective as we can. Same thing. They would fill out that contact form, and that's what they would say too. I want to have a conversation about becoming a patient.
Mm-hmm. That's how you get started. Terri, thank you so much.
Always wonderful to talk.
Mind
with
blown
you.
over all of it.
Mind blown. That emoji, that mind blown. I love that one.
We'll insert that
now. Yeah,
it's appropriate for something like this, and I think it's going to change a lot of lives.
Well, it is it's a joy to be able to have patients come back, ones especially back in the beginning days of Medical Transformation Center, I used to do all the intake calls. And so I would get to hear the story, what had transpired for that person and where they had been, and sometimes the hopelessness in their voice. And then to be able to, first of all, tell them, hey, you're not abnormal for us, and then to bring them in and to really get to work with them and then see the impact that has on their function, on their outlook, on things that have shifted in their lives and their families. That's what makes it worthwhile.